Next, let's go through the statement of retained earnings. The statement of retained earnings explains how retained earnings changed during the period. This is the financial statement that lists dividends, and the statement is prepared for a period of time. Again, for a period of time would be month, quarter, or a year. One thing that I really want everybody to remember is that dividends is contained in the statement of retained earnings, not in the income statement. Dividends are a distribution of assets to shareholders, and that is listed in the statement of retained earnings. Next, let's prepare the statement of retained earnings. Again, we're going to use the same numbers for that expressions transaction analysis questions that we did. As with any financial statement, the statement of retained earnings starts off with the header information. The first item to come on the header information is the name of the company, which is expressions. The next is what statement we're preparing. We're preparing the statement of retained earnings, so that's what goes on next. And then the period. It's for the month ended August 31st. Again, remember this is a period statement, so it's going to be for the month ended August 31st. The first item that goes on a statement of retained earnings is the retained earnings at the beginning of the period. So we're going to have retained earnings. The beginning of the period for this question is August 1st. So what is the retained earnings at the beginning of the period? If you go and look at the data set for this question, we do not see retained earnings listed anywhere. Remember, the definition of retained earnings is the profits that have been earned and retained by the business ever since its beginning of time. Well, this particular company started on the 1st of August. So on 1st of August, they would not have had any retained earnings. So going back to the question, the retained earnings for this particular company is 0. So we're going to put 0 for retained earnings beginning of the period. The next line item in the statement of retained earnings is net income. We're going to go ahead and add net income. So plus net income. Where do we get the net income figure? Net income, if you remember, was calculated from the income statement. So let's go back to the income statement and identify how much we had for net income. Our net income was 1,230. So that is the number that we're going to go ahead and put in our statement of retained earnings. So we're going to have 1,230. Once we get that down, we're going to just have a subtotal here. There's no name for it. It's just a subtotal. And then we're going to have dividends. So we're going to subtract dividends. Remember, dividends reduce retained earnings. And I'm going to put that in parentheses so that it shows that it needs to be subtracted. The last item in the statement of retained earnings is the retained earnings at the end of the period, or in this case, it's August 31st. It is calculated by subtracting the dividends of 900 from the subtotal of 1230. So the total of retained earnings beginning of the period, you add that to net income. That gives you 1230. You subtract dividends of 900, and that gives you retained earnings at the end of the period of $330. One thing that I want you to keep in mind is there is a relationship between financial statements. So you've already seen the first relationship, which is net income from the income statement flows through to the statement of retained earnings. Next, we will be covering the balance sheet.